Namaste, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. It is my great honor to be speaking before you at Banaras Hindu University in the sacred city of Kashi, where we have Shiva as Vishwanath, the Lord of the universe, and we also have Kala Bhairava. And of course, many great gurus have been here, the devatas, the worship, the renovation we see. So this is the heart of Bharat, and we might say the heart of the Hindu Dharma and Sanatana Dharma. Now, I don't use PowerPoint. I speak as whatever comes forth. And I've been happy to be associated with Sandeep Kumar and his wonderful writings and works. Please study them in great detail, because he's teaching you not just information, he's showing you how to know, how to perceive, and how to move beyond outer information to inner direct experiences. Now, our topic is relevance of the Vedic sciences, or the Veda Vidya today. And of course, we live in an era in which there is many changes going on relative to how we live, how we perceive, and of course we now have so many other instruments, mechanical instruments for judging our world. Upanishads say that we have 5 senses that draw us outward so we don't look within. Now we have 500 instruments, computers, screens that do the same. So our consciousness is moving more and more outward, which means that you're losing contact with your own inner reality. Now, education also is changing. Of course, we have many more textbooks, much more data, much more information, better communication. But there are certain fundamental issues of how do we really know, and are we learning how to know, or just what someone else tells us is the facts. And facts, of course, are often invented by the human mind to justify certain aspects and certain ideas. And here, the Vedic knowledge has a particular relevance. Now, we go back to Upanishadic ideas. The lower knowledge, apara Vidya, is based upon name and form. And I would like to say name, form, number, because that is the key. And our knowledge today, everything coming out of the computer base, is mathematical and quantifiable and also programmed. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of information, a lot of communication can be developed that way. And more complex mathematics can be done to produce new ideas or new insights overall. But in the process, we are becoming less self-aware. And you'll notice that the power of attention is getting reduced substantially. It's being measured in seconds or even minutes. But the power of attention, dharana shakti, is the basis of all true learning. Whatever you give your attention to is programming you and affecting your mind and also your nervous system overall. We also see a decline in memory. The memory is now on the computer or the cell phone, but not within you. So without that smriti, you cannot do that inner contemplation. You can't be walking in the trees and then contemplating the ideas. You have to take your cell phone out and find out what tree it is or where you may happen to be at the current moment. So it's not just a question of what you learn, but this whole way of learning. And that is the foundation of the Vedic sciences and Vedic Vidya. Vidya means what has been seen, but it also means what has been seen at an inner level of awareness, not simply an outer level as an object in the external world. So today we have more knowledge of the outer objects in time and space, but we have less knowledge of the inner knower. We don't know ourselves. We say the Atma Vidya is the basis of all knowledge, but we don't have the Atma Vidya. Whether it is modern science, religion, medicine, psychology, philosophy, there's no concept of Atman even there. They are still caught in the field of the mind, emotions, and also the intellect at the most. And we have all these institutions that are said to be institutions of higher learning, higher education. Now, higher education should be the Atma Vidya, but higher education is not that. Today, it's more complexity, more peer reviews, which means the same people are making the same judgments on someone else. So we need to go back to that understanding of mind, consciousness, self, and levels of consciousness. Now, in the Vedic Bharatiya tradition, we need to cultivate an inner direct knowing, which is only possible through meditation or the silent mind. And we need to know not just simply what we can measure on the outside, but what is the reality on the inside. And that reality is beyond time, place, name, form, and number. So we can easily then divide knowledge into two forms, that which can be quantified and that which cannot be quantified. And the higher knowledge, the inner consciousness, is beyond quantification. And quantities are measurements of the mind. Time and place are coordinates of the mind. And we say the human mind. We measure the outer world according to our human measurements. I often tell students that ever since we as human beings have been on this planet, we have been obsessed with measuring reality. And by that we mean measuring the reality. And we've developed so many systems of measurements, so many numbers, so many machines. Now we have even more of them so that more things are measured and quantified. However much we measure the world, there is always something left over that is immeasurable. And that is the true reality. Measurement is it's a practical tool or a gain of the mind. You have to go somewhere, you have to know how far it is from you. But your own awareness is always with you, or it always should be with you. So Upanishads are also explaining and exploring waking, dream, deep sleep, samadhi. So this science of consciousness is there as part of the Atma Vidya. And that is still not in the higher education in the world today. Now, sometimes different professors talk about philosophy and they compare Kant and Upanishads and Buddhism and something else, but they don't have a sadhana. They're not actually engaged in interchange of awareness. That is why if you study the Vedantic text, take a work like Viveka Chudamani of Adi Shankara, it's not about metaphysics, it's more about chitta shuddhi, chitta shodhana, purification of the mind, and creating a sattvic mind and lifestyle. That's also the yamas and niyamas of the Yoga Sutras and various similar systems to that. So that means without the Chitta Shuddhi, how can we really know? And essentially it's very simple. Without that, you can only see on the outside. You can't see on the inside. Yoga Sutras, Purusha, Drashta, the seer. Upanishads, by what can the knower be known? That is not a question that can be understood simply in scientific language. In fact, in the Vedic system, brain, mind, consciousness, Atma, these are different things. They have their connections. But now we have a medical system that is saying brain is brain chemistry, and different parts of the brain do different things. So in that respect, mind is made into a function of the brain, or even consciousness into some function of mind or the brain. But it is not true. Let me give you a simple example. We talk about that we live in this world of 4 dimensions, at least since Einstein. They've also recognized that 4th dimension. But of course, you have length and width and height and all these measurements and all these time-space coordinates. But again, these are activities of the mind. The fact is, when we are right here, right now, we're experiencing things in our own consciousness. It's not like we have to measure their size, shape, weight, form before we can have any experience. And if you go out into nature, these human coordinates are not really valid. And if we look at life, we see there are also many different forms of time. I've also said in other contexts that everything is alive. Vedas say that. Prana is in everything. But it is not following necessarily our idea of biological prana, nor is it necessarily following our idea of biological time. Puranas also talk about the age of the universe, and they make it many multiple billions of years longer than the scientists have decided it is at present. I have had some discussion with scientists. They say that, the universe is 14 billion light years old. And I asked them the question, well, how can you say that? The Earth and the Sun, you say, are only 4 billion. So there was no light, there were no years at that particular time. The fact is, time is changing. It can speed up and slow down. And then we have this idea that time is like a river flowing, and it only goes in one direction. In the Vedic view, or even the Vedantic view, which I take up, time is like the ocean. We live in the ocean of eternity. Waves rise and fall. That is the movement of changing time. But you are always, Ramana used to say that, Ramana Maharshi, we are always there. The consciousness is always there. The presence of the eternal is always there. And these time changes we see are at the surface. And even, of course, we have the aging process. But even as we get older, we still have an awareness, and the entire universe is aware. Philosophy, of course, has been around for a long time. In fact, I often find the more ancient philosophy, East or West, is more sophisticated than what is going on today. But we have this concept in Upanishads of the Vidya, the knowledge of being. And that's something we don't have. Even science cannot have. Science can measure something measurable, which is some form of becoming, doing, name, form, change, process, energy. But the being is always there, and the being is conscious. And that's where also we make mistakes. We confuse the human being, for what are we as human beings? We have an embodied consciousness or mind. Sri Aurobindo said we are materialized, we are mentalized material beings. I'm now thinking where maybe we may go a little bit further and actually become machines. At least some people are saying now that the AI can be your guru. The AI can give you information, but the guru requires a realization, a sadhana, an awareness. And what did the rishis know how to do? They didn't just know how to access a computer. I'm all in favor of computers because I wrote a bunch of books on a typewriter years ago, and it's much easier to do on a computer. But we have to understand our own deeper awareness and consciousness, and that is not something that can be quantified. So we like to say there is the quantifiable and there is the transcendent. And we need to have that transcendent knowledge and transcendent vision. Otherwise, our equipment is going to dictate to us who we are and what to do. Another thing I've seen is that, we look at these screens, basically, and some are even small screens like cell phones. And again, they have a lot of value, but the mind tends to imitate that which it gives its most attention to. In other words, if you're looking at screens all the time, your mind starts to function like a screen. And so what we're seeing today is a loss of depth perception because you're used to seeing a small screen, a loss of ability to perceive nuances. Even now, sadly, we take children out in nature and they're not able to get in that state of interest where they see all the different nuances of nature. You'll notice nature is never mathematically perfect or mathematically replicatable. Every leaf, every snowflake, we have certain patterns and designs, but we have a deeper creative force. And here, we have this nice art display that we saw at the museum. The universe and life is not simply a science, it is also an art. We must remember that. Now, art can never be entirely measured. And besides what we see, there is also a rasa. There's also an essence behind it. So we get caught in the appearance, which is the Maya, and we don't see the Atma, the Satchit Ananda, which is the rasa or the essence. So the Vedic science is very important, first of all, as helping us train the mind for some deeper awareness and turn the awareness within. In the Western psychology, etc., they don't have a concept of Atma per se. There's a concept of ego or ahankara. And they don't have the idea of how do we make the mind sattvic. They're more concerned with how they are being measured by the various people and institutions around them. So now we're also seeing a decline in creativity. And it's interesting to note that most great creativity, particularly art, sculpture, music, dance, requires the hands. You can't just make it, you can't just copy it onto a screen and have AI do it for you. So it's very important that we understand, first of all, the relevance of the Vedic way of knowledge and what it is able to teach us, which is again beyond the realm of simply name, form, number. It can move into that realm in a certain sense. I mean, even a sculpture has a certain form, but it has a certain presence also. So we need to preserve the Vedic way of knowledge, and knowledge in the Gurukula sense of communicating with the teacher and having open dialogue and discussion, not just simply repeating something or accepting something because it is said to be the current state of science or the current way of reality. And then we put a lot of emphasis on the Ayurveda because you are a living being. You are a pranic being. And prana cannot be reduced to chemistry. In Ayurveda, we recognize that there are certain totalistic, holistic, or overall forces governing the body and the mind, namely prana, also mind, consciousness. These are not reducible to an organ function, even a brain function. So we have to go back to that sense of what is the essence or what is the transcendent behind what we see. You know, everything we see is an appearance. There's a deeper reality. We always tell people you can't just look at the box. You have to see what's in it. You have to have a perception that is looking not simply at what appears on the outside, but what is the intention, the motivation, the creativity or awareness behind that. And here we also live in an era which is dominated by the media. Again, I'm not criticizing necessarily saying media is bad, but media means you're receiving something, sensory information that has been pre-digested by someone else. And what we have in the Vedantic system, this aparokshana vidya, you have to see something directly for yourself, direct experience. It's not just simply having your eyes open, it's having an open state of awareness. And we have that, then these boundaries and barriers of time, place, person will gradually go away. And then we also have the Vedic science or Vedic view relative to cosmology. And of course we have all the different lokas, from particularly physical loka all the way up to satya loka, tapaloka, etc. Those concepts are also not in science. They may even call them mythology, but they're dealing with subtle levels of energy, awareness, and consciousness, because obviously the physical realm doesn't exist in itself, and there's interconnections with the stars, the planets, the atmosphere, the biosphere. And what the yoga also teaches us is that the entire universe dwells within you. Your own subtle body is the cosmos, is the universe as a whole. You do the Gayatri mantra for Surya, Savita, to inspire you. Why? Because Savita Surya represents Atma, connects us to cosmic intelligence. And what the yogi and the rishi can do is not just simply access the internet, which has its place, of course. They can access the cosmic mind, Mahatattva. They can also aspect and connect to Ishvara, the Ishvara Chaitanya, the ruling force behind the universe. So when the mind is in that silent state, it can access a higher form of direct knowing. And that is what has always given the basis of the Vedas. Now, modern science also, again, tends to think that everything is quantifiable, although we don't like to be quantified ourselves. But we have to remember that the deeper reality can never be quantifiable. You know, even if you take something like art, you really can't create a formula for it. It's based upon a different way of seeing. And even if you go out into nature, you really can't measure every aspect of nature. There's always something more that is going on there. So cultivating that direct perception. And you'll even notice that some of the scientists say they discovered their insight in a moment when their mind wasn't there. When they were concentrating, when they were out in nature, then another vision can come there as well. Now, what we have in the Vedas, we do have mathematics, but we also have the correlation of mathematics and language, which is, of course, behind the Sanskrit language. We have all these different metrical forms. We also have a whole connection of the mantra, the bija, and recognizing that there are certain sounds that represent the vibratory forces of cosmic intelligence that are inherent in the Akasha, that are inherent in space itself. In fact, you'll notice that whenever you create space, you have more energy. And a lot of these sadhanas, they say that Shakti arises from space. And so there are all these energies that we can work with at an inner yogic level. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have science, but there is a slight difference. I mean, for example, look at our modern architecture. It's very practical, but it doesn't have the same rasa, the same beauty, the same art, whether it's in Europe, whether it's even here. In India, of course, there is renovation going on, which is important. And what we see in India today at a more practical level, one, someone who's been in the United States a lot and traveled all over the world, we see that today the highest number of people who are well educated in higher aspects of technology are Indian. From India or from India background, we have that in Silicon Valley. In the United States, the Germans are saying, please, why don't some of the Indians, you please come to Germany too, because we need that as well. UK, other countries like that. But at the same time, this Bharatiya civilization has preserved the Atma Vidya. The others haven't. I'm not saying they never had it. They've had mystics of various sites, various times, poets who had certain insights. So that ability to not only develop the modern science, but also to preserve the deeper sciences is there. And to master this new technology, you also need a kind of rishi vision. You can't be looking at things simply in terms of number, time, place. Of course, we tend to look at things in terms of profit and other outer things. Again, I'm not saying that is wrong, but it colors your perception. So in other words, in the India context, you have the capacity to preserve the rishi, the yoga vidya, and to bring it into the context of the modern science in a way that can uplift modern science and also give more clarity or ability to express the Vedic sciences as well. We have Jyotish, that's often criticized, even though a lot of these guys, even going back to Newton and Kepler, were also astrologers. But the point of that is that we're living in it's a living universe. And so there's a connection of consciousness. Everything is aware at some level. And there are also different levels of time. For example, if you're studying geology, you have to look at geological times, which is millions of years. And you say, oh, but you know, these rocks and things aren't alive, they're inanimate. But if you speed that up, you know, make 1 million years into a day, then you can see a lot of changes are going there, a lot of changes are going inside of them, and even a lot of the geology is coming from outer space. So there are different time cycles also moving on. If you look at the atmosphere in the course of one day, the clouds can come up and have a shower and go down. So it's even a faster movement of time in the biosphere than we have simply as human beings. So the Vedic view is more of, we could say, the multipolar world or the multidimensional world and the interconnected universe. You know, sun and moon is the right and the left eye, Agni as speech, prana as the vayu, as the breath. There's all this correlation going on and possible. And you've had many great gurus in modern times that have taught these teachings and that still are. So it's very important to preserve them and to recognize that unless we have that inner awareness, the technology may overwhelm us because we are not grounded in our inner being and inner self. So Vedic sciences are even more relevant. Even Ayurveda, we also have a psychological view. For example, in Ayurveda, we say that Rajaguna, Tamoguna, these are the doshas or the disease-causing factors at the level of the mind, and yet we don't have any teachings of that in modern medicine or even in modern education. So there are many challenges before you, but there are also many opportunities before you, and a way of using the Vedic sciences that can complement or give additional guidance to the outer sciences as well. Some physicists are also looking for a field of consciousness behind the universe. And of course, the Vedic people said, well, that's you, by the way. You are that, which is something they haven't yet been able to see. But more search is going on, and more of this knowledge can be shared. And BHU is a great forum to bring these different types of knowledge together. And also to have a critique. For example, Sri Aurobindo gave a very good critique of Western civilization. He just didn't say, oh, this is all great. And also a different critique of science. What can science know? And what is appropriate for science to know? If you're going to be looking at the stars, you can get the most powerful microscope in the world. It might help you analyze certain things, but it's the wrong instrument. So what is the correct instrument of knowing the true reality? Knowing the universe, knowing oneself. Again, that is more the silent mind. That is more the self-awareness. Even some physicists talk about the self-aware universe. So cultivating that higher level of consciousness and awareness is most important. And that is also a very significant Vidya. In fact, it is the highest Vidya overall. I know you'll be studying different things. And there's also a practical necessity in the Indian context. So you have to keep up with modern science. You have to keep up with AI because these are the factors that are dominating society today. But you must remember that true intelligence can never be artificial. AI cannot be your guru. AI can help you correlate data and information on very many extraordinary levels and also preserve. In fact, a lot of these Vedic teachings can be brought out. And we have to then also recognize this greater Rishi vision, mantra vidya, prana vidya, different levels of mind, panchakoshas, three gunas. There's tremendous knowledge and wisdom that has also stood the test of time. In medicine today, they do tests, and now they're finding that some decades later the test isn't working anymore. We have a wisdom and a knowledge that has been proved by generations or centuries. Of course, it needs greater adaptation. So we need also what I've been calling a dialogue of civilizations. India is a civilization, Bharatiya Sanskriti, and to understand Indian civilization, you have to understand the terminology involved. You can't use the terminology of chemistry to understand astronomy or poetry. So also restoring those Vedic terminology, Vedic insights, primary terms, and Vedic view of the universe, I think that should be part of the education, not to the exclusion of more specific data, but to make it into a broader vision and a deeper understanding. So I hope I'm able to bring some insights or new ideas into what you are doing, because it's very important that the Vedic sciences in the context of the modern sciences are connected, and we learn the inner vidyas as well as the outer vidyas, and learn to use our inner consciousness and connect to our inner being, not just simply to count things on the outside of ourselves. And we must remember, Sri Aurobindo also talked about that we are part of an evolution in consciousness, not just simply a material evolution or technological evolution. So with these words, I will close my talk for now. Again, I'm very happy to be with you. It is a great honor to be at BHU and also Kashi Vishwanath. And may this great wisdom that is inherent in the Ganga and also inherent as Kashi continue to unfold beyond all, you might say, merely numerical limitations, become the kind of universal influence, because Kashi is the Vishwanath, Shiva as the Lord of the universe, not just simply the deity of a particular place. And that vision of that universal consciousness self needs to be restored. It's even very critical, just even for having peace and happiness in the world. Shri Guru Vyo Namaha.
Ram. Uh, this is Rupal sir. Ram. Apart from the topic, I want to ask you one thing. Sir, what made you to study this Vedic literature and how did you start your journey?
Yes, what made me study this and how did I start my journey? I have to say in life I've never had a plan. I'm not certain why things have happened as they have, but I've tried to be open and receptive and not caught in a certain formula. In my case, I did study a lot of the philosophy, science, literature in the Western schools, but I always had a kind of mystical vision. I also looked at art, and I also looked at what the West had to offer, even something going back, whether it's ancient Egypt or whether it's, and then understanding the different spiritual philosophies in the world, Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and then even Islamic Christian. And I found that the Vedanta made the most sense to me, because certain views like karma and rebirth, Brahman as the cosmic reality, and Atma as the self-knowledge. And then you saw how this, I could see how this knowledge you could find in the Greeks under Plotinus or in other mystical systems, but not preserved or understood. And then we could come into contact with the great gurus of India. For example, Paramahamsa Yogananda's teachings were accessible to us. And many of the other gurus, Ramana Maharshi, at a young age, I knew of a lot of the gurus in India, and I sent a letter to Anandamoy Ma, just out of chance, and she answered. And I was in contact with her uh, uh, swamis and also her the women around her, this Atmananda and Nirvanananda and so forth. And then coming to Bharat, and then I also wanted to go back to the original teachings, which took me more into Sanskrit. And in my 20s, I spent a lot of time just going through Rig Veda, because I wanted to go back to the origins. Sri Aurobindo helped me with that. And in the context of coming to India, I met so many great gurus and teachers and sampradaya, whether through the Ramanashram, or Aurobindo, or the Shankaracharyas, Kanchi, Sringeri, Swami Dayananda, Chinmaya Mission, so many things. You have that knowledge here, and that got me dedicated to that. And then the Vedic sciences, certain connections to Jyotish, certain connections to herbs, certain connections on these levels. I was interested in those as well. And what we found is that there was a lot of interest, but very little accessible. So we actually brought a lot of the first, say, books published on Ayurveda even into Europe or even into Russia as well as the United States. And we find in so many countries there are a group, maybe not large, but dedicated at studying Vedic sciences, yoga, Vedanta, and we see that growing for the future.
Pranam, sir. So you light how Vedic sciences are relevant in present times. We must study. But my question is, how come towards the study about consciousness, the traditional study has diminished drastically and dramatically? Is there any bottom line where we must stop and look behind where we went wrong?
Well, yes, that's a very good question. And what we must understand is that we have for some time been living in an age or a culture defined by technology. Uh, and over time, technology has become more complicated. And technology has a couple of limitations. Yogananda said that we're living in a very, what he called electrical age, where so many, not much equipment is coming out. And he said that science is like a two-edged sword. Uh, any new development can also be weaponized. And so we are insecure. What is happening today? They're having a war, but they're also producing all kinds of new weapons. We don't know what it's going to do. And our current civilization is very centralized. So it has a certain vulnerability. Again, you have to develop these things. But at the same time, you have to know how to use them with greater consciousness and awareness, and also with greater diplomacy. That's another issue. We don't see a lot of diplomacy going on in the world today. So we have to bring that back, and you're in a better position in Bharat to do that than the people are in other countries. You also have your family traditions, you have your local traditions. There are so many texts that you have, whether Vedas, Puranas. Puranas have tremendous knowledge. They've been thrown out by the academics because they use a more symbolic language like the Vedas. And all these texts, there's a tremendous inner knowledge that must be cultivated as well. So this needs to be pursued and shared. But yes, there's a lot of opposition because the Upanishads state that, the Asura. Who is the Asura? Asura is the one who believes the body is the self. The Deva is the one who believes that Atma is the self. So obviously, we live in an era in which we have so much emphasis on the physical, we get lost, and we want to control the outer world, which is how the ego operates. And if you are running after controlling the outer world, you cannot understand the uh, inner world. So we need some change of values as well as practices, and a good family system that brings these higher practices, values to the children as well. We saw them all on the Ghats and all of that, and the uh, practices you have here. But it's challenging, and the future remains uncertain in some ways. But I would say India is the world's fastest growing economy, but it's also preserving its culture and civilization, while Europe, its culture is going. We even were looking at European operas, but they've been totally redone for today in a certain political mode that had nothing to do with what the original story was about. So that is part of your challenge. And in the world as a whole, there are these ancient traditions that can come up and be part of the dialogue and the expression. There are psychologists who are starting to use meditation, and there is a recognition of certain powers of herbs and natural healing. Audio.
Is Ayurveda, how we can use Vedic mantra in Ayurveda general practice in mental illness?
You said Vedic mantras?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. Yes, in fact, it would, as we look at psychology, I did a book called Ayurveda and the Mind, addressing that. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, that book was presented before the British Parliament. There is a leader, Bob Blackman, who leads the India caucus there. And what you have to understand, according to Ayurveda, mantra is the main tool for healing the mind. Why? Because the mind is made up of our thoughts, our memories, our mental patterns, and whatever, again, we give our most attention to. And this is also part of, again, the science of the three gunas, tamas, rajas, sattva. So the sattvic mind has a focus, a one-pointedness, and a clarity. So the mantra, we say that, what do the modern psychologists tend to do? They kind of dig up your memories, go into your past, what your family did or what happened to you. That's sort of like treating a disease by trying to go back and dig up where it was when it started. You're just bringing out the same old toxicity again. So when you do the mantra, you make the mind one-pointed, then the rajas and tamas goes away. So we say, don't struggle about the past, create awareness in the present, and make that, because then there's another rule about the mind. If the mind gives 51% of attention to something, it immediately becomes 100%. So if you have your Ishta Devata, if you have your mantra, you have your sadhana, that creates a Shakti, a power that restructures the mind. If you're taking in mainly, sometimes I also tell people that tell students that we let people into our minds that we would never let into our homes. In fact, most of entertainment tends to do that. So that whole mantra sadhana is the best way to deal with the psychological disorders, because if the mind becomes one-pointed, receptive, sattvic, all those things will go away. The rajas and tamas don't have any place to stay there anymore. On the other hand, if you keep analyzing your psychology, even Krishnamurti used to call it paralysis through analysis, because when you get caught up in that thought stream, you need just an open mind and a direct awareness, and the mind can heal itself, and also the force of prana. In fact, prana and mantra together, because prana holds emotion. Now here I'm using prana in the sense of the breath, or they say that the mind is the jnana shakti and the prana is the kriya shakti, that go together. So you can also use the pranayama. If you can focus your prana, we say the one-pointed prana is necessary even for a one-pointed mind, or a unitary prana. And you'll notice that people are holding a lot of emotions in the breath and the lungs and the different organs of the body. So the pranayama also helps. And the pratyahara, because we're always looking on the outside, and if you're always looking on the outside, you're going to fall over because you're not looking within, and have sattvic impressions. Go out in nature, you see the sky, you see the mountains, you see the river. Nature has a sattvic energy. If you're in a rajasic, tamasic environment, then that gets disturbed. So there's many practical things you can do, but mantra is very foundational for the right use of the mind. And you might say your most common thought is your mantra. So you might think, for some people, it's woe is me, or I didn't get that, or I want to go there. So make sure to cultivate a primary mantric orientation, thought, inquiry to the mind, and these other problems will go away. How do you